Hey guys, tonight we slip into sandals worn thin by centuries, brush the dust from ancient salt slabs, and step into the quiet hum of midnight trade in the heart of Africa. The stars hang low and wide, the air sharp with cold and the scent of packed dates, worn leather, and last night's cooked millet. You're at the edge of Timbuktu, a city that once pulsed with more gold than Paris and whispered in more languages than you can count on your fingers. It's dark, but the whole caravan is alive, camels grumbling, humans grunting, and one rooster, judging you. You sling your pack over your shoulder, careful not to jostle the straw-wrapped crate housing that ridiculous bird. His name is Chuku. He looks mildly offended, probably because he's the most important member of your crew, and he knows it. See, you're about to measure your journey not in miles or kilometers, but in rooster calls. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past the gate as it creaks open, where the old guard mutters something about sand spirits and roosters being cursed. Typical. You nod, half listening, while you mentally calculate the first leg of your journey, 7 rooster calls to the next well. That's not a joke. Not a proverb. That's the literal system. Salt traders, gold runners, ivory haulers, across the ages, across the Sahara, learn to estimate distance by the reach of a rooster's crow. Why? Because roosters are consistent, portable, and unlike your cousin Hamza, they don't fall asleep at the reins. The night stretches out in all directions like spilled ink. You adjust your turban, tune your ears, and wait. At the front of the line, a merchant shakes a worn gourd. The rooster inside hears the rattle and, sure enough, belts out a proud, echoing cock-a-doodle-doo. It bounces across the sand, carried by dry air and open space. You listen. Then you move. The unit of measurement is not the crow itself, but how far it travels before the sound dies. On good days, that's maybe 1.5 to 2 kilometers. On windy days, it might shrink to half that. Either way, seasoned merchants like you know how to track the fade. That first crow reaches your ears clear and crisp. You count. 1. A few hundred steps later, another. 2. The rhythm becomes a kind of clock, a metronome keeping the pace. You smile. This is your element. You've done it enough to know, by the 6th rooster call, your calves will ache in the water and your gourd will slosh ominously low. By the 7th, you'll smell the palms before you see them. Historians still argue whether this method started in the Sahel or farther south in the forest kingdoms. Some claim it was born of sheer necessity, roosters being easier to maintain than flags, bells, or guards. Others suspect spiritual roots, that the rooster's crow was once seen as a sacred marker of time and transition. You're not really fussed about the academic squabble. All you know is that your rooster works better than the ivory-handled compass the Portuguese trader tried to sell you last dry season. As the caravan winds deeper into the sand, the sound of bells and camel burps fade behind you. You find your stride, the soft crunch of your sandals blending into the dark. Chuku is quiet now, tucked in and resting. He'll crow again soon when the gourd rattles, or maybe when he feels like it. He's that kind of bird. You remember your grandfather's story, how in his youth, a rooster saved a whole caravan by crowing at the right time, warning of a dust storm creeping up like a thief. A good rooster, he always said, knows what the wind hides. As you walk, you note the stars, Orion there, stretched like a hunting bow. You chew a dried fig, and muse briefly about how this all started. Maybe it wasn't about roosters at all, but sound. Maybe sound, in an endless land with no signs, no mile markers, was the only map anyone could afford. And besides, roosters didn't just mark distance, they marked rhythm. 1 crow meant walk. 7 crows meant rest. 10 meant something had gone terribly wrong. And if the rooster refused to crow, you were either very lost or about to be. Still, the weirdest part? Some traders insisted they could tell how far they'd come just by how long the echo took to return. A crow that bounces once is half a mile. One crusty merchant once told you, a crow that bounces twice means you're in debt and headed toward trouble. You chuckled back then, but now, along with the sky pressing down, it feels more like prophecy. The 7th crow finally comes as the first glow of morning tints the horizon in indigo and blood orange. You crest a dune and there it is, the well, the palms, the low cluster of stone huts wrapped in thatch. You did it! 1 segment down, and your rooster didn't betray you. You set Chuka down in the sand. He gives you a side eye, fluffs his feathers, and pecks something imaginary. You're pretty sure he's asking for a raise. You pour yourself a tin cup of water, cool from the shaded clay jug. You sip slowly, watching other caravans trickle in, roosters squawking, merchants laughing. This is life in the desert, measured not by watches or written maps, but by a bird with an alarm clock for a voice and no concept of personal space. And to think, this is only the first leg. Chuku is awake and cranky. His feathers puff with the self-importance only a creature with zero understanding of maps but full control of the itinerary can possess. He flaps once, then twice, then lets out a morning crow like a trumpet announcing royalty, or perhaps just demanding breakfast. You offer him a few crushed sorghum kernels from your pouch. He pecks once, then turns his beak skyward as if to say, "You're lucky to have me." Honestly, you probably are. The morning chill still clings to the air as traders stir around the well. Camels snort, water jugs are refilled, and somewhere a child is loudly insisting that her rooster is smarter than everyone else's. You don't disagree. There's a strange kind of reverence here for birds with punctual vocal cords. The method, known in whispers and sand-scratched journals as the feathered alarm clock system, is older than most of the kingdoms that once ruled this desert. You've heard elders talk about it in that tone usually reserved for ancestors and jinns. A rooster that crows is a pathfinder. A rooster that stays silent? Dig a shelter, my son. It works like this. A rooster's crow can be heard across flat desert terrain for a certain distance, on average, about 1.5 kilometers. So, early merchants figured, why not use that? You'd crow, listen, walk, and when the sound no longer reached the ears of your rearmost travelers, it meant you'd gone too far, or not far enough. Repeat, reset, rest. Of course, this requires two things, a consistent bird and a sharp ear. You've got both, mostly. Chuka likes to show off, especially if the other roosters crow first. He's competitive. A little too competitive. He once crowed early just to one-up a fluffier bird from Gao. That mistake cost your caravan 2 extra hours in the heat because the well you expected was still 1.5 crows away. Historians still argue whether this system was ever formally taught, or just absorbed over time. Some scrolls suggest apprentice merchants trained under soundmasters, elders who'd spent decades calculating how rooster calls changed over terrain types, wind patterns, and even humidity. Others say it was trial and error. You think it's probably both. Learning the desert is part science, part superstition, and part surviving long enough to pass down your notes. One quirky tidbit you'll never forget? The great Tuareg merchant Haidara ibn Salim once wrote that the only true way to gauge a rooster's reliability was to drop a single red date in its feed. If it ate it first, it was a born leader. If it ignored it, leave it behind. Or eat it. No one's entirely sure whether he meant the date or the bird. You shake your head, remembering. That story gets told a lot around the fire on long travel nights. Roosters are many things, but food is their last identity. They're colleagues. Sometimes annoying colleagues. Ones you can't fire, because, well, no one wants to be the guy walking blind across a sand sea. Your route today is a bit longer, 9 crows to the next resting point, which the elders mark as Owl's Hollow. You've never seen an owl out here, and you're fairly sure the name was born out of someone mishearing a traveler half asleep. Still, it's the name everyone uses, so it sticks. That's how things work out here, tradition, repetition, and a touch of absurdity. You pack up, adjusting the straps of your woven carrier, and set Chuku into his padded basket at the head of the line. His basket is ventilated and slightly elevated, so his crow carries better. Yes, this is real science. No, you're not making it up. Some merchants even fashion special crow horns, long hollow tubes pointed backward to enhance and direct the sound of their rooster's call. Think megaphones for poultry. You're about half a crow into your journey when the wind shifts. You feel it before you hear it, a sudden hush across the dunes, like someone holding their breath. Then, in the distance, a rival caravan's rooster crows. Chuku bristles. You know what's coming. 3 beats later, your bird launches his rebuttal, louder, longer, and with a theatrical wing flap. The entire caravan laughs. One guy claps. A woman in the rear yells, "That's my boy," and you're not even sure who she is. This isn't just petty bird drama, it's functional. Each rooster call is a living signal, where your group is, how far ahead or behind you are, and what direction you've taken. On cloudless days, that info spreads far and wide. It's your way of saying, we're here, moving, and doing just fine. But there's risk, too. A crow heard by the wrong ears might mean bandits know your distance from a settlement. It's happened before. That's why many caravans vary their crow times or even travel in silence, with roosters muffled until nightfall. It's a delicate balance, Signal too little, and your own people get lost. Signal too much, and someone might take what you're hauling. You crest a ridge and pause. There, far below, the shimmer of mirage. You know it's not real. You hope it's not real. Chuka crows again, once, clear and strong. The sound cuts through the morning and flutters across the sand. You time it, listening for the fade. 1001, 1002, gone. Just over a kilometer. Good. You're on track. As the sun climbs, you tighten your head wrap and shield your eyes. This leg will be hot. You sip water, glance back at your crew, and catch someone balancing a rooster on their shoulder. Stylish? Not really. Effective? Debatable. But honestly, out here, who's judging? You make your way forward, step by step, crow by crow. It's a dance as old as the dunes, where rhythm is measured not in drum beats but in feathered proclamations. At the fifth crow, you stop for rest. Chuka puffs up, content. You pet his head, and for once, he lets you. Maybe he knows he's nailing it today. Or maybe he's just sleepy. Either way, you smile. 5 down. 4 to go. The air grows heavier as the day deepens, like someone's turned up the weight of the sun just to see who complains first. Your 5 rooster calls in, boots half swallowed by warm sand, when you realize that distance out here isn't something you see, it's something you feel. In your ankles. In the dryness behind your eyes. In the slow, smug silence of a rooster who knows exactly how far you've come because he screamed it into the void and the void screamed back. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Chuka lets out his 6th call just as you reach the low ridge known to some as Thief's Elbow, a narrow pass famous for being the best place to get quietly robbed. The breeze whistles oddly here, curving around the rock like it's keeping secrets. You pause. Listen. 1 bounce. Faint. No reply crow from another caravan. Good. This is the part of the route where a merchant learns to pay extra attention. It's also the stretch where the rooster becomes not just a measurement tool, but a survival tactic. A crow heard too early, or too late, can mean the difference between a safe pass and an ambush. There's a legend, often told in hushed tones after dark, of the crow that came too soon. The story goes like this. A merchant named Jakba, ambitious and inexperienced, boasted the loudest rooster west of the Niger. His bird crowed with such vigor that it echoed over the dunes, drawing attention miles around. One day, after just 3 calls, Jakba pushed ahead, thinking he'd gain time by skipping the 5th rest. Problem was, his rooster had crowed prematurely, spooked by another bird, and Jakba's caravan reached the next ridge 2 hours before the scheduled guard change. They never saw the bandits coming. Jakba survived. His goods, however, ended up fueling someone else's early retirement. Historians still argue whether the tale is fact or cautionary fiction. Some believe it's a parable designed to teach patience. Others insist it's documented in a now-lost ledger from a southern Tuareg trading post. Either way, no one questions its lesson. Never rush the rooster. You adjust your pace, letting the call guide your steps like a heartbeat. Rooster. Pause. Walk. Rooster. Pause. Rest. It's less of a system and more of a song. The rhythm turns into a kind of trance, a soft hypnosis you welcome after too many hours under a sun that wants to make leather out of your skin. One of your travel mates, an old man named Male, limps beside you, cackling to himself. You know, he says, some claim roosters were once worshipped in the Red Lands. Not for waking the day, but for dividing it. Breaking it into pieces small enough to carry across the sand. You raise an eyebrow. So, bird-based timekeeping? He grins, toothless. What's time but the distance between one sound and the next? It's one of those conversations that could either be ancient wisdom or heat-stroke nonsense. Out here, both are valid. At crow number 7, the terrain changes. The sand gives way to crusted rock, cracked and jagged. The echo bounces more sharply now, almost metallic. You listen again, mapping in your mind. Merchants who've done this route long enough can read the crow like others read stars. The tone tells you the ground's changing. The echo's delay tells you slope. A long, dry crow with a lingering tail might mean open space ahead. A clipped one? Hills. Trouble. Chuka gives a solid one this time, bold and full of gravel. You nod. The pass is opening up. A good place to breathe. Maybe eat something that isn't dust. There's a small clearing up ahead, a half circle of worn stones under a withered acacia. Traders call it Crow's Nest, not because of any actual birds nesting there, but because the sound of a rooster crowing from that spot carries forever. Some say the stone underfoot resonates. Others swear there's something magnetic about it. Personally, you think it's just a good spot with solid acoustics. Still, the idea that sound leaves behind memory, that every crow ever uttered might somehow linger, is comforting. One quirky bit you learned in that very spot last year? A camel handler once claimed he could tell which rooster had crowed just by the echo. That one, he'd said, pointing to the east. That's bakeries. Nasal tone. Slight rasp. Too much sand in the diet. You're not sure what kind of superpower that is, but honestly, it's impressive. The eighth crow comes low and steady. It flattens out over the open plain, cutting through the wind like a thread through cloth. You stop, let the echo dance back to you. You're almost there. Then a sound, a different kind. Another rooster, off to the northwest. Not from your group. Maybe another caravan. Or maybe, not a caravan. You exchange a look with Molly. He nods. That's 3 calls from one side. Not enough spacing. Not travelers. Scouts, maybe. Or amateurs. Rooster calls aren't just directional, they're informative. Spacing, pattern, repetition, all tell you something. A call every kilometer? Professional. A call every 500 steps? Newbies or trouble. You press on, cautious now, and at the 9th call, you see it, Owl's Hollow. No owls, as usual. But cool shadows and the gentle chatter of another friendly caravan. You breathe easier. You approach slowly, giving the universal signal, 3 short rooster crows spaced evenly, a call and response known as the safe passage tune. A nearby bird replies. You're in. The 2 groups meet, rest, and share stories. A woman from the southern group swears her rooster once crowed in perfect rhythm with a drum. Another man says he met a bird that refused to crow at all unless you said please. Merchants collect these stories like charms. Maybe they're nonsense. Maybe they're maps to somewhere that doesn't exist anymore. As you settle in, Chuka struts around like he owns the camp. You let him. He's earned it. Today, you navigated 9 rooster crows and made it through a stretch of desert that once swallowed armies. And tomorrow? You'll do it all again. The moon rises fat and low, casting silver patterns across the cracked earth as the camp at Owl's Hollow quiets down. Fires shrink to embers, soft voices murmur over shared bowls of stew, and your rooster, Chuku the Tireless, is still awake, making suspicious eye contact with a melon rind. You lie back against your pack, tracing constellations with your finger, when a nearby traveler asks the question everyone's heard at least once. How many crows to gal from here? You smile, eyes still on the stars. 22, if your bird's honest. 24 if he's dramatic. There's a ripple of laughter. Because every merchant knows, the rooster's crow might be consistent, but interpretation? That's an art form. By now, you've memorized the feel of a 1-crow walk versus a 3-crow trek. 1 feels like a song verse. 3 feels like an album. But tonight's rest is welcome, and you know the next segment is a crossroads, a place where rooster calls don't just measure distance. They choose direction. At dawn, the group gathers again. Another crow rings out, and just like that, you're moving, sand trailing behind your feet, wheels creaking, voices low. The terrain begins to fork. Ahead, faint markers, stone piles and notched sticks, point toward 3 different paths. Each leads to a different set of oases. The elders call this spot Shaka's 3, named for a legendary merchant who, depending on which version you believe, either split his caravan into 3 and made triple the profit, or got horribly lost and invented the world's most confusing map. Here, the feathered system flexes in new ways. Each route is measured by a known number of rooster calls. But instead of distance to the next stop, you're gauging distance to the last audible crow. Merchants called this the trail tale, the echo that lets you know who's still behind you. You try it now. Shake the rattle. Chuku crows. You wait. 7 seconds. Then, a faint reply from the trail on the right. That's your tail crow. It tells you that a caravan just left that path. If you want less traffic, you go left. If you want gossip and fresh trade news, you follow the echoes. You pause, listening. Molly joins you. Left path is drier, but fewer tolls, he murmurs. Middle's safest. Right's fastest, if your bird can handle the cliffs. You consider this. Your supplies are good. Your rooster is in fine voice. You nod toward the middle. Steady. Predictable. Chuku approves, because of course he does. At this crossroads, roosters aren't just tools, they're guides. The way their calls bounce off terrain gives seasoned traders a preview of what's ahead. If the sound comes back jagged, the ground's rough. If it softens quickly, there's vegetation. If it disappears entirely, open basin or, more ominously, a dry well. Historians still argue whether this was instinct or deeply refined auditory science. Some say ancient African traders were proto-acousticians, able to map regions purely by sound. Others believe it was storytelling dressed up as expertise. But you've traveled enough to know, these birds, these calls, they work. One strange tale from this very fork? A merchant named Obi once claimed his rooster could crow differently depending on which route was best. Right path, short crow. Middle, long. Left, no crow at all. Everyone assumed Obi was mad, until his bird refused to crow for the left path the day a flash flood wiped out part of the trail. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Obi's rooster knew something the rest didn't. There's a lot of reverence wrapped up in these birds. They're fed first, given the most shade, carried in custom-woven baskets with padded bottoms. You once saw a man refuse to travel with a new caravan because he said their rooster had shifty eyes. Out here, that's a serious accusation. As your caravan chooses the middle path, the air shifts. The dunes roll softer here, shaped by gentler wind. Chuku crows again, testing the air. This time, the echo comes back with a slight warble. You squint. That's either a nearby ridge, or another caravan trying not to be found. You signal a pause. The group halts. You rattle. Chuku crows. This time, silence follows. Then, faintly, a second crow, timed almost exactly 3 beats behind. That's a code. An old one. It means, not a threat, just passing. You relax, wave to the rear, and the group continues. This call and response system isn't universal, but the more seasoned the merchant, the more they recognize the crow codes. 3 short calls means stop. 2 long, 1 short means water ahead. A single call repeated 3 times at intervals? Danger behind. You carry a little cloth strip sewn with these codes, a cheat sheet tucked in your belt pouch. Because even in the desert, communication is everything. Chuku crows again. You count. The fade is quick. You're approaching another sound pocket, a hollow in the earth where sound behaves like an opinionated elder, loud when unasked, absent when needed. At the bottom of the hollow, you set up a rest spot. Merchants lounge in the shade, roosters nestled in baskets. One rooster lets out a weak little cuh. Everyone laughs. You better refund that bird, someone says. Sounds like it's whispering curses. You laugh too, sipping water. But your mind is already on the next stretch. From here, it's a steady climb. The air will thin slightly, the crows will carry longer, and you'll need to be more precise. Your mentor once told you, crow mapping is like tuning an instrument. Your bird plays the song. You listen for the changes. You nod to Chuku. He puffs his feathers, content. You pet his head, gently. He preens a little, like he's preparing for a performance. Which, in a way, he is. The crossroads are behind you. The path ahead is yours alone to measure. And you'll measure it, as always, 1 crow at a time. The path you've chosen stretches long and sun-bleached, bordered by wind-carved dunes and peppered with the faint memory of footfalls long erased. You walk in rhythm with the silence, until Chuka shatters it, delivering a crow so theatrical it echoes off nothing in particular but still manages to assert dominance over the landscape. That's the 4th crow since the crossroads. You're making good time. Or so you think. Until you notice something unsettling. Molly drops back beside you, squinting at the horizon. Didn't we pass that sandstone ridge already? He asks. You frown. I thought we were circling it. Nope, he says, not blinking. We're looping. You stop. Rattle the gourd. Chuku crows. You wait. Nothing comes back. No echo. No call from the tail. Just a bird shout swallowed whole by space. Which means either you've drifted off course, or something's absorbing the sound. You scan the horizon. No movement. No dust plumes. Just the heat rippling like a fever dream. Now comes the moment every caravan dreads, the possibility that your rooster has led you astray. It sounds dramatic. How can a chicken throw off an entire travel route? But you know better. You've seen it before. Back in Jen, an entire gold-laden caravan wandered into disputed territory because their rooster's crow echoed off a strange rock formation and made them think they were 5 crows ahead of where they actually stood. They lost half their goods and 2 camels before finding a safe passage again. And the rooster? Legend says it was banished to a village where even the goats refused to talk to it. Historians still argue whether this event, the so-called false echo incident, was real or just a morality tale warning against over-reliance on avian GPS. Either way, the message sticks. The rooster is a guide, not a god. You pause, close your eyes, and listen again. Really listen. No echo. So you try something old-fashioned, terrain reading. You kneel and press your fingers to the ground. Fine grit. Crumbly. Not the packed trail you expected. And the wind is wrong, it's curling around from the south, which means you veered too far left. You curse gently under your breath. Chuka tilts his head, feigning innocence. Someone whispers, maybe he's just tired. Tired or not, it's time to test the theory. You rattle again. Chuka crows, and you spin slowly, listening for the direction where the sound lands hardest. There. To the east. A faint double bounce. You call the group to follow. Slowly, deliberately, you adjust course. And sure enough, after half an hour, you spot a line of worn stones buried in the sand. Distance markers. Real ones. Ones you didn't place. You were off by at least 1.5 crows. A rookie mistake. But out here, it happens even to the best. Sand moves. Wind shifts. Birds get temperamental. One time, a merchant you knew swore his rooster was cursed after it crowed at a sand dune shaped like a rival trader's face. He said the bird was distracted by the devil. The next day, it refused to crow at all. Turns out the devil was just a trick of the light. And the rooster? It got over itself by breakfast. You settle the group near a petrified tree, dead centuries ago, still standing tall and gray as bone. A perfect place to recalibrate. You offer Chuka water. He sips delicately, like royalty. Then, right on cue, lets out a crow that rings like truth. You test the echo. Count. 1001, 1002, bounce. Good. You're back on track. And that's when the trouble starts. Because from behind, another crow rings out, shrill, urgent, close. Too close. Bandits? No. Wrong pitch. Then you see them cresting the ridge, another caravan. Not one you recognize. Their rooster crows again. Fast. Sharp. They're signaling. It takes you a moment to remember the code. Too short, too long. Route trap, Molly mutters. You freeze. A trap laid by someone manipulating crow patterns. It happens more often than people admit. Trick the traders into taking a shortcut. Ambush them mid-route. Take their goods, leave their roosters. One clever scheme, told often in the copper markets of Agadez, involved a fake caravan and a trained rooster that only crowed on command. They'd camp just outside echo range, then time false calls to lure groups into dry riverbeds where escape was near impossible. You signal your group, sharp arm wave to the left. Everyone ducks low, veering off the main trail. You rattle the gourd. Chuka crows. The sound bounces freely now, unchallenged. You hold still. Wait. Nothing but wind. The tricked caravan, or maybe just lost, fades behind you. You sigh. Crisis averted. Barely. Chuka hops out of his basket and struts in circles like he just won a duel. Which, in a way, he did. You toss him a kernel. Well done, partner. That night, the group is unusually quiet. Even the roosters seem contemplative. You sit near the edge of the camp, staring into the fire, listening to soft crows from every direction. Some real, some wind-stretched memories. The system works. But it's not flawless. Tomorrow, you'll approach the next settlement, one marked as 7 crows from the thorn wall. A place where different routes converge and tales get traded. You lean back, close your eyes, and drift off to the sound of Chuka softly snoring. Yes, he snores, beside your pack, wings fluffed over his head like a tiny, arrogant blanket. And somewhere in your dreams, a rooster crows just slightly off-key, and a caravan takes a wrong turn. By dawn, your joints creak like wooden wheels, but Chuku is bright-eyed and already stretching his wings like he's leading warm-ups. You groan, sit up, and he crows, as if to say, rise and stagger, my human. Today's route is less about distance and more about trust, specifically, trusting a creature whose brain is roughly the size of a chickpea to help you survive in a geography designed to test every ounce of your patience. You begin the morning march early, beating the sun to its high seat in the sky. The air's cool, still tame, and the path ahead is lined with brushy shrubs that whisper underfoot. It's the stretch traders refer to as Feather Alley, a long, flat ribbon where rooster crows can travel remarkably far if the wind behaves itself. Here, you're supposed to get a perfect echo. Today, of course, nothing is perfect. You rattle your gourd. Chuku crows. Silence. You wait. Count. Frown. No bounce. Not even a whisper of return. You check the air. The wind has turned just slightly, blowing against your path. That's the problem. This is what separates the amateur from the master, knowing when to trust your rooster, and when not to. You sigh, signaling a halt. The group gathers. You explain, the crow vanished. Headwinds eating it. A groan ripples through the ranks. Not because of you, because of the camel. Specifically, Hamid's camel, who clearly knows something's off. It lets out a low, theatrical moan that sounds like it's dying of boredom and betrayal. Camels, you see, are like opinionated toddlers. Loud, stubborn, and absolutely sure they know the way better than you. Unlike roosters, who simply crow and wait, camels try to lead. And lie. Often. You've seen it. You've lived it. One time, on the edge of the Sahel, a lead camel dragged a group east for 2 days because it wanted water and remembered a spring from 3 years ago. The rooster tried to warn them, its crow didn't echo, but the humans insisted on trusting the camel's instincts. They ended up circling back, for crows behind schedule, morale in tatters. Since then, there's been a popular phrase among desert merchants, trust your feet, not your fleet. And also, camels lie. Roosters don't care enough to. Historians still argue whether this distrust of camels was universal or just specific to certain trade cultures. Some archaeological records suggest that in earlier centuries, camel caravans were guided by both human scouts and birds tied to poles for signaling. Others believe the whole rooster system was more psychological than practical, a kind of morale booster with benefits. Either way, there's no denying which one gives more consistent feedback. Your rooster may not love you, but he doesn't try to lead you off course for the joy of it. He just crows. And today, finally, his crow returns. A long, fluttery bounce. You nod. The air shifted again. You're back in range. As you resume, a younger merchant walks beside you, asking questions. How do you know how far a crow travels? Is it the same in all directions? What if 2 roosters crow at once? You grin. Kid, if 2 roosters crow at once, you've got 2 opinions, and no map. That's part of the reason experienced caravans usually only travel with 1 designated signal rooster. Everyone else's birds? Muzzled. Or at least discouraged from chiming in. Some groups use tiny fabric hoods to keep the birds quiet. Others sprinkle sand around the basket to muffle sound. One eccentric group from the kingdom of Ifa even played drums all day so they wouldn't hear accidental crows at all. Quirky, yes. But effective. Crow management is as much a part of navigation as keeping track of rations or checking your direction by the sun's shoulder. You tell the young merchant about Rooster Rafi, a bird from Sokoto so loud he once disrupted 3 caravans simultaneously. His voice carried 4 crows wide. And no one could agree where the echo was coming from. It caused a traffic jam in the desert. No, seriously. Camels stuck shoulder to shoulder, everyone accusing everyone else of cheating. Rafi was eventually gifted to a sultan's garden, where his voice wouldn't cause logistical chaos. As the sun rises higher, the heat sets in. Your pace slows. You rattle again. Chuku crows. The echo comes back weak. That's your cue. Break time. You stop under the shade of a wind-tilted tree, barely alive but just leafy enough to provide some relief. The group collapses around you, grateful for the pause. Chuku takes a dust bath, kicking up little clouds as he rolls onto his side with theatrical flair. You can't help but admire him. Unlike the camel, who is still moaning for no reason whatsoever, Chuku has done his job flawlessly. He's not trying to impress you. He's not trying to predict things. He just gives you a measurable, predictable sign, and lets you do the thinking. It's the ultimate low-maintenance coworker. That's the secret, really. In a world where animals often become symbols of strength or loyalty, the rooster is a symbol of clarity. Its call is binary. It's there or it isn't. It carries or it doesn't. No interpretation. No bias. Sure, sometimes a crow might come early or late, but even that has a rhythm, a pattern you can learn. As you sip water, a trader next to you muses aloud, "Ever think the rooster doesn't know it's helping us?" You shrug. Probably. But it doesn't matter. We're using its voice, not its opinions. The wind shifts again, and you feel it, cooler, lighter. Time to move. You rise, signaling the group, and Chuku hops back into his travel perch like he was waiting for the cue. The gourd shakes. He crows. This time, the sound flies strong and sure, bouncing ahead like a scout waving a flag. The route ahead is still long, the sun's still hungry. But your bird is louder than doubt, and for now, that's enough. Night descends slowly, the way honey drips from a spoon, thick, quiet, and without apology. Shadows stretch long over the sand, and stars blink to life one by one, like the desert's own slow clap of approval. You huddle around a small fire with the others, sipping spiced tea from a chipped cup. Chuku is curled beside you, chest rising and falling with soft, rhythmic breaths. He's earned his rest. But you're just getting started. Tonight's leg is special. It's one of those rare stretches where you'll travel by starlight alone, the moon your lantern, the wind your guide. And most importantly, this is a night run. A trade route notorious for scorching days and frigid evenings, best crossed in darkness. You stretch your back, adjust your robe, and nod to the others. One by one, they rise. Quiet. Focused. The plan is simple: move during the cool night, rest in the day. But here's the catch: visibility? Minimal. No sun to judge distance. No shadows to gauge terrain. That's when the rooster becomes king. You rattle the gourd. Chuku wakes instantly, squinting at you like a disrespected celebrity woken before his call time. Then he crows. A long, full-throated belt that rolls over the dunes like a thrown spear. You smile. This is the reason traders call it chicken math, the ancient art of using rooster crow intervals to track movement in the dark. Forget stars, forget footprints, forget intuition. The only thing that counts right now is sound and stride. Each crow tells you how far you've come. And more importantly, how long until your next water point. Merchants learned long ago that when you can't see the world, you measure it in minutes and echoes. It's not perfect. No system is. But it works well enough to move gold, salt, and spices across thousands of kilometers. That's not bad for a bird who doesn't understand currency. As you trudge through the cool sand, the caravan spreads out into a line, each group counting steps between rooster crows. 60 steps a minute, 5 minutes per crow interval, roughly 300 steps. Multiply that by echo strength, divide by terrain type. It sounds complicated, and it kind of is, but it becomes instinct after a while. You walk. Chuku crows. The sound cuts through the night. Someone behind you clicks their tongue twice. That's the signal. The echo bounced off a ridge, direction verified. You're not even mad that your entire navigation depends on a slightly judgmental bird. You've come to trust the rhythm. It's mathematical. Predictable. Unlike, say, Ibrahim's map, which was apparently drawn during a sandstorm by someone with vertigo. You remember trying to read it once, half the names misspelled, most of the distances labeled far, and a weird smudge near Gal that might have been tea or might have been blood. You'll never know. But the rooster? The rooster doesn't smudge. Historians still argue whether this style of crow counting was uniquely West African or if it had roots elsewhere. Some point to similar oral distance systems in parts of India and the Arabian Peninsula. Others think it's purely homegrown, a brilliant solution born of flat terrain and acoustic savvy. You've always favored the homegrown theory. The desert teaches cleverness. It rewards listening. And out here, a rooster's voice might be the only honest sound for miles. At the third crow, the terrain changes. Your sandals sink deeper, the sand looser, almost dune-like. That tells you you're entering the tangle, a stretch known for deceptive softness and hidden dips. Chuku crows again. The echo's shorter this time. The sand is eating sound now. You slow your pace. That's the rule. Shorter echo, slower steps. Let the bird lead. One quirky bit of knowledge you once heard at a tea stall in Kano: some night traders claim roosters can sense bad ground. That they crow differently, softer, warier, when the path ahead is treacherous. Is that real? Who knows? But you've been around long enough to notice that when the crows change pitch, you'd better pay attention. You pause. Rattle. Chuku crows. The sound returns weirdly warped, like it passed through something. You raise your hand. The caravan stops. Then, almost imperceptibly, you hear the soft crunch of sand shifting unnaturally to your left. You freeze. Not bandits. Not an animal. A sink dip. One step more and you'd be up to your knees in powder-soft sand with no bottom in reach. You shift the path a few meters right. Crisis avoided. Just like that. And not a single word was exchanged. Just a crow. A breath. A shift. That's the power of the system. It's quiet. Elegant. Cooperative. Even Chuku seems satisfied. He fluffs his wings, and for a moment you think he's smiling. Probably gas. Still, it's comforting. Around the seventh crow, the air grows colder. Your breath fogs slightly. The stars are so clear now, it's like the sky's been polished. You see the edge of Orion's belt and think of your father, who used to tell you that those stars once formed a bow aimed at the future. The sand crunches differently here, finer grains, more compact. You're nearing an old water stop. One more crow should do it. You rattle the gourd. Silence. Chuka blinks at you. You rattle again. Still nothing. You glance down. He's sleeping. You prod him gently. Nothing. Now, listen, a rooster not crowing is not unheard of. Sometimes they're tired. Sometimes they don't like the temperature. One bird famously refused to crow until someone complimented its feet. But at night, in the middle of the desert, no crow is not ideal. You prod again. Chuku opens one eye and lets out the weakest, most half-hearted urkada you've ever heard. It barely makes it past his beak. The caravan stops. Everyone looks at you. You clear your throat. He's recalibrating. It's a moment. An awkward one. But then someone behind you starts counting paces out loud. Another joins. Soon the whole group is doing rough math together, estimating steps between weak crows. Not ideal. But it works. You laugh quietly. Trust a rooster too much, and you forget the human part of the system. Eventually, Chuku finds his voice again. Maybe the air warmed. Maybe he had a dramatic moment. Who knows? Either way, his next crow is strong, proud, and perfectly timed with the sight of an old dry well cresting the hill. You made it. And you did it in the dark. Night caravans are not for the faint of heart. But with a good bird, a clear head, and just enough superstition, they're more than doable. As you set up camp near the dry well, you look up at the stars and smile. Not because they guided you, but because tonight, for once, the rooster got it mostly right. Morning creeps back over the dunes like a lazy cat, golden paws stretching across the sand while shadows shrink and the air slowly begins to warm. You sit cross-legged near the campfire ruins, chewing a hard biscuit and watching Chuka pick at invisible bugs in the dust. Around you, the caravan stirs slowly, bones crack, pots clink, and somewhere, a camel offers a loud opinion no one asked for. Today is different. You're not just walking. You're surveying. You check your notes, scratch symbols and crow counts from last year's journey. You're retracing the route of a 12th century Ghanaian ruler, one who apparently believed roosters were the most accurate surveyors the world would ever know. His name was King Amankara, and according to dusty oral scrolls and fire pit gossip, he didn't trust compasses, flags, or even the stars. What he trusted? Roosters. Dozens of them. The story goes, Aman dispatched surveying parties across his kingdom, each carrying an official bird in a royal marked basket. The system? Simple. Walk until the rooster's crow can't be heard. Mark the spot. Rattle again. Repeat. And when the crew returned, the king would measure the number of rooster crow distances to determine not just route lengths, but resource spread and even taxable zones. Historians still argue whether King Amankara actually built his maps from chicken echoes, or if this was a poetic exaggeration of how trade routes were measured. But the image endures, robed surveyors crouched on ridge tops, listening with eyes closed to a rooster belting across the plains. Quirky? Yes. Effective? Depends on your bird. You pat Chuku on the head. He's eaten, rested, and strutting with full diva energy. Which is good, because today, he's your royal instrument. The terrain opens wide and flat, a perfect soundboard. Your task, measure the distance from the old dry well to the outpost known as the Singing Rock, using only crows. You start with a rattle. Chuka's first crow is clean, smooth, and surprisingly on-key. It echoes long and low, bouncing off something unseen, maybe a distant stone outcrop. You take a slow breath. Then walk. 1001, 1002, 1003. The first rule of rooster surveying? Know your stride length. You count your steps, converting them into approximate distance. About 75 steps in, you hear the fade. That's your first mark. You scrape the ground with your heel, plant a small flag, and signal the rest of the group to pause. This isn't just for tradition. There's a science to it. Sound travels faster over cooler air and further when there's little wind resistance. That means early morning is your best bet for long-distance crows. And today, the conditions are nearly perfect. You rattle again. Chuku crows. You walk. Count. Mark. It's rhythmic. Almost meditative. By the fourth crow, the ground changes slightly, less gravel, more packed dirt. You notice Chuka's crow carries farther. That makes sense. Sound likes hard surfaces. Loose sand swallows it like gossip in a royal court. Malay watches from a rock, sipping warm tea and chuckling. You know, he says, in Aman's court, birds that failed were sentenced to silence. They'd wrap cloth around their beaks and make them walk backward through the palace. You blink. That sounds fake. He shrugs. Maybe. But people remember it. And that's the beauty of this rooster system, it exists in that curious space between functional science and living myth. Every echo, every squawk, becomes part of the legacy. As you continue marking distances, you notice something else. Chuku crows slightly differently each time. Not in pitch, but in length. The longer the path ahead, the longer his call. Coincidence? Maybe. But you're starting to suspect he knows more than he lets on. By crow number 7, the singing rock comes into view, a sharp spire rising from the earth like a finger pointed at the sun. Traders call it that because if you tap it just right, it hums. That's probably due to some internal cavity, but of course, local lore insists it was carved by a god with a tuning fork. You set your final mark, count the flags, and jot down the total. 8 rooster distances from the well to the rock. You turn to Male. Wouldn't it have been easier to just count steps? He grins. Sure. But which sounds more impressive? I walked 2,000 paces, or I crossed 8 crow lengths. Point taken. There's something undeniably poetic about using birdsong to measure empire. Especially in a world that rarely writes things down. The crow becomes the pen. The echo becomes the page. And as you rest beneath the singing rock, Chuku lets out one last crow, this one unprompted, loose, and oddly cheerful. It bounces beautifully off the spire, comes back with a slight harmonic twist, and lingers in the air longer than any sound has a right to. You lean back, hands behind your head, and smile. Maybe King Amon was onto something after all. The next leg of your journey begins just past the singing rock, where the terrain flattens into a great open basin locals call the listening field. It's not much to look at, just sun-baked earth and wind-worn shrubs, but it's famous among caravans for one reason: this is where sound does tricks. You've been here before, and you remember how rooster crows behave strangely in this place. Some stretch impossibly far. Others get swallowed like secrets. The elders say the land chooses which sounds to keep and which to forget. Naturally, that makes it the perfect spot to study what traders call squawk physics, the unofficial, highly unscientific discipline of understanding how a rooster's crow interacts with desert geography. You tighten the strap on Chuku's basket and step into the basin, eager to test his voice against the land. The first crow of the morning is bold, sharp, confident. You rattle, and Chuku obliges without hesitation. The sound bursts forward, sails ahead, and then vanishes. No echo. Just silence. You frown. Classic listening field move. You mark your position anyway. Because while the crow didn't return, that in itself is data. You walk forward 20 more paces. Rattle. Crow. Again, it disappears into the ether. But this time, just before the silence fully settles, you hear it, a faint, delayed bounce. You smile. It's one of those deceptive fields. The sound isn't lost. It's ricocheting weirdly, bending around uneven terrain like water in a ditch. Like magic, Male mutters from behind you, watching the sand as if it might whisper something helpful. You nod. But it's not really magic. It's physics. Dry air, low humidity, and flat land make sound travel differently. Traders who mastered this could calculate changes in elevation based purely on how many seconds a crow took to come back. Historians still argue whether this ability was taught or inherited. Some suggest old desert schools trained apprentice merchants using specially bred roosters with controlled pitch. Others scoff, saying no such academy existed, just sharp ears and lots of trial and error. Either way, you believe it. You've seen the best navigators work like musicians, tuning their pace to the landscape's acoustic response. One particularly gifted merchant named Zara could apparently tell time, distance, and terrain softness from a single rooster crow. She used to say, "You don't just hear the echo, you read it." You've tried reading them. Sometimes they speak plainly. Other times, it's like trying to understand a camel's feelings. Crow number 3 today is a gem. Clear call. Solid return. And that split-second timing you love. Crow, wait, bounce. That's roughly 1.4 kilometers. You mark it down. Chuku, meanwhile, is having a fantastic morning. Maybe the air agrees with him. Maybe the scenery inspires. Maybe he's just showing off. Either way, he crows with gusto, and every echo becomes part of your mental map. You sketch it in your head, each bounce a checkpoint, each fade a caution. One of the odd things about rooster acoustics is how sensitive they are to sand quality. Loose sand dulls sound. Coarse, rocky grains sharpen it. Somewhere around crow 5, you feel the texture shift underfoot, softer, finer. You wait for the change in echo. Sure enough, Chuku crows, and the sound is swallowed. No bounce. Dead ground, Male says grimly. He's right. These stretches are tricky. You can't rely on echo. You have to fall back on rhythm and count. Traders often recite poems here, not for morale, but for pacing. 5 lines per crow length. If the last word falls when the ground shifts, you're still on track. You try one now, murmuring a verse you learned years ago. Feather flies and wind obeys. Sand forgets what sky displays. Step by step and voice by sound. Mark the hush that wraps the ground. Crow again, the silence pays. As you finish, Chuku crows again. No bounce, but the rhythm matches. You nod. Still aligned. A trader near you raises a question. What happens if a bird crows too soft? You grin. Then you walk in circles and blame the bird. It's a half joke. There's a well-known story of a caravan lost for 3 days because their rooster had a sore throat. Turned out the poor thing had pecked at a spiny date kernel. The caravan only realized the problem when they swapped birds and the echo suddenly changed. Since then, it's common to test your bird's voice each morning, not just for crow strength, but for pitch clarity. You do that now, rattle again, let Chuka rip. Perfect pitch. Crisp tone. Slight tail on the echo. That means the terrain is curving upwards slightly, probably approaching a ridge. You quicken your pace. And sure enough, a low incline appears ahead. You climb it slowly, letting the crow mark each step. The echoes return brighter now, bouncing back quicker. That tells you you're leaving the listening field. By crow 9, you've crossed the basin completely. You pause at the far edge, marking a final distance on your route scroll. Chuku, pleased with himself, lets out a totally unnecessary encore. The group applauds. One trader tosses him a millet crumb. You laugh. If you start feeding him every time he does his job, he'll unionize. There's something deeply satisfying about reading the land through sound. No markers. No GPS. Just feathered acoustics and desert intuition. You glance back at the basin, wide and quiet again. It looks simple, but only those who've listened closely know how complex it truly is. Just like a rooster. You've barely cleared the listening field when you start hearing the difference. Chuka crows again, but the sound isn't the same. It's still sharp, still proud, but there's a subtle shift. A higher pitch, maybe. A crisper edge. You pause. Look around. Nothing unusual. Same sky, same sun, same parade of exhausted camels. So what's changed? Then you hear it again, another rooster crowing somewhere nearby. And that's when it hits you. You're entering the accent belt. This is the stretch of trade routes where birds start sounding like the regions they come from. You'd laugh, but it's true. Traders call it rooster dialects, and the phenomenon is well known. Depending on where a bird was raised, its crow carries different tonal patterns, some sharper, some longer, some with weird musical lilt. And this? This is the stretch where they all collide. One merchant near you jokes, it's like crossing a border without paperwork, just feathers and a vowel shift. Historians still argue whether rooster dialects are real or just imagined differences based on ambient noise and human bias. But experienced traders swear by them. You've heard stories of elders identifying a rooster's hometown just by its crow. And today, you're about to get a full lesson in regional poultry linguistics. Chuku crows again. This time, he's met with an echo, and then a response. Another bird, perched on a nearby caravan's crate, sends a return call. It's slower, deeper, almost like it's dragging its vowels. The effect is bizarre, like hearing a cover of your favorite song in a different key. Chuku freezes. Blinks. Then crows again, louder. Rivalry. Instinctual. Predictable. You recognize the other rooster now, Kibbo, a stout, grumpy thing from the coast, known for his opera voice. He once made a merchant cry by crowing during a marriage proposal. True story. You were there. The two birds volley back and forth, each call slightly exaggerated, like they're mocking each other. The caravan stops to listen. People chuckle. Someone starts placing bets. 10 shells, says Chuka cracks first. You raise a hand. Not a chance. He's got hometown pride. But you're also listening closely, not for the squabble, but the acoustic shift. These call battles aren't just entertainment. They're useful. You can learn a lot from how a crow sounds compared to its echo. Chuka's sharp call cuts straight. Kibbo's hangs and drifts. That means something. You kneel and scratch a note. Wind traveling east, echo drift west. Higher pitch equals thinner air equals slight elevation. It's subtle, but valuable. Even a half-crow difference in echo strength can tell you if a valley is ahead or if you're skirting a wind tunnel. And here's a strange tidbit you picked up from a scholar near Niani. Some believe that rooster dialects mirror the rhythm of local human languages. In fast-speaking regions, birds crow quicker. In slower-speaking areas, more drawn-out syllables. The idea is still debated. But when you hear a rooster from the mountains croon like a jazz singer, it makes you wonder. You continue walking, passing a trio of caravans parked in a semicircle. Each has a rooster, and each one is crowing slightly differently. One short and sharp, one rising in pitch, one ending with a weird warble that sounds suspiciously like a goat sneezing. Chuku cocks his head at the last one. You lean in. Don't worry, you whisper. Yours is still the most handsome. Rooster vanity is a real thing. You once saw two birds refuse to eat for hours after losing a crow off to a younger rival. They stood in silence, eyes closed, as if mourning their lost honor. But the dialect difference? It's not just for show. Traders use it. Say you're entering a region unfamiliar to you. If the local birds sound different, you know where you are and where you're not. It's a low-tech version of a signpost. And when you hear a crow that sounds like your own, you know someone from your region has passed through recently. That's why older caravans kept notes, small scrolls with phrases like "for south calls," one coastal mix. It told them who was nearby, friend or stranger. You walk through the afternoon, counting the dialects. You hear at least 6. And then, near a rest point shaded by a cluster of thorn trees, you hear a perfect match. Another rooster, crowing just like Chuku. Same cadence, same pitch, almost identical. You freeze. He hears it too. This time, there's no rivalry, just confusion. You follow the sound and find a lone merchant sitting with a crate, smiling. His bird is nearly Chuku's twin, sleek, bright-eyed, with a call so similar you'd swear they trained together. The man grins. Northern hatchery, he says. Yours too? You nod, grinning. Borderlands, near the cliff line. Mine's from just south, explains the accent. You both laugh. The birds blink at each other. Then, slowly, they crow together. The sound is eerie, perfect harmony. The rest of the caravan goes quiet. For a moment, it's like hearing one voice coming from two mouths. Then the echoes bounce back, delayed slightly, wrapping the camp in sound. You shake the man's hand. Share a meal. Swap notes. He's heading west. You're going east. But for this brief moment, your routes overlap, marked by twin calls and the soft shuffle of hoof and sandal. That night, under the stars, Chuku settles beside you, feathers puffed with pride. The accent wars are over. The region has spoken. And your bird? Still top of the charts. You're barely awake when it starts. A rustle. A crow. Then shouting. You sit up groggy, the sun not yet finished painting the dunes gold, and see half the caravan gathered in a circle near the rest tents. Chuku is up right beside you, already alert. His feathers are slightly fluffed, not out of alarm, but intrigue. You both know that sound. It's the sound of a dispute. You wander over, half hoping it's another argument about camel seating arrangements, always entertaining, but no, this one's serious. And feathered. Two rival caravans have arrived at the same point along the trade route, both claiming they've reached this spot at the correct 10-crow distance from the last known milestone. But here's the twist, they each claim the other must be wrong, because their roosters disagree. One says the distance was 9 crows. The other says 12. Naturally, this calls for what merchants cheekily refer to as the cockfight of calibration. No, not that kind of cockfight. No blood. No spurs. No gambling behind tents. This is a battle of sound. A showdown of precision. A dueling of squawks. Everyone here knows the rules. 2 roosters. 1 location. Each will crow 3 times. The merchant whose bird produces the most accurate distance echo, confirmed by neutral listeners, wins the claim. The loser? They must adjust their route notes and offer a peace gift. Usually dates. Sometimes a new sandal strap. One time, memorably, a sack of suspiciously well-dried lizard tails. Historians still argue whether this tradition started out of necessity or just as an excuse to let roosters settle what maps could not. Some believe it was once part of formal trade law under the Mali Empire. Others say it's just a glorified bet wrapped in feathers and pride. Either way, it's happening right now. And guess who's been asked to officiate? You. Because Chuku? He's known. He's feared. And most importantly, he's considered unbiased. As much as a rooster who once side-eyed a sand oracle can be. You step forward and take your position. Chuku, perched regally on a smooth rock, is already assuming his role as judge and timekeeper. Someone places a scrap of cloth for him to stand on, ceremonial, apparently. He stands on it for 3 seconds, then walks off with disdain. Typical. The first contender, a rooster named Munsakluk. Regal. Loud. Possibly a little too confident. His merchant, a wiry man with sun-scorched arms, nods solemnly and rattles his gourd. Munsakluk crows. The sound cuts across the plain like a whip crack. Everyone listens. 1001, 1002. Bounce. Not bad. A clean 2-kilometer echo, maybe just a hair short. Second call. This one wavers a little. Wind interference. You squint. Chuku squints too, as if unimpressed. Third call. Strong recovery. But the crowd murmurs, some thought it peaked too soon. The echo bounced back, yes, but oddly early. Might mean the bird overcorrected. Now it's the second rooster's turn. He's older. Scrawnier. Named Jollof. You're already rooting for him. His merchant rattles a palm husk. Jollof blinks, then crows. The sound is surprisingly deep. It rolls low over the sand. The bounce comes slow, but solid. Call 2. Even better. Crisp. Predictable. Call 3? Perfect. The echo flutters back at just the right rhythm, like a musician timing his drum beat with the heartbeat of the earth. You glance at Chuku. He nods. Well, he dips his head slightly and fluffs his chest, which is about as close as you'll get. You step forward. Distance judged by echo return, Jollof takes it. 12 crows confirmed. Munsa's crew, your measurements are off by 1.5. Groans. Grumbles. A few good-natured slaps on the back. Then, in a moment of surprising dignity, the losing merchant pulls out a cloth pouch and hands over his offering, 6 perfectly preserved apricots. You try one. Sweet, tangy, and probably the best result of a rooster duel you've ever tasted. Later that morning, the groups part ways, notes adjusted, route logs updated. One trader walks beside you, still amazed. Imagine letting birds settle your disputes, he says. You shrug. Well, humans don't echo the same way. But the cockfight raises a curious point. At what point did these animals shift from mere alarm clocks to trusted instruments of measurement? Some say it began when roosters proved more reliable than water clocks in desert climates. Others suggest it's simply a matter of sound memory, the fact that a bird's crow is instantly recognizable, repeatable, and natural to track. You remember a tale from a caravan elder once shared over roasted dates. In the distant past, 2 rival kings settled a boundary disagreement by walking toward each other, each with a rooster. The spot where both birds crowed at the same time? That became the border. You're not sure that's historically accurate, but you are sure it's poetic. As the day draws on, the sun presses down harder. The trail thins. The heat thickens. Chuka takes a break, riding in the crook of your arm, satisfied with his morning's arbitration duties. You glance at him, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. You murmur, not bad for a bird who doesn't even know what a map is. He responds by sneezing into your sleeve. Typical. By late afternoon, the sand has gone soft again, clinging to your feet like dough and threatening to swallow every step whole. Even the camels are quieter, too hot to complain. But the roosters? They're getting chatty. That's how you know you're approaching the Sunrise Market, a small but well-known trade post nestled in a hollow framed by flat rocks, where the most peculiar tradition reigns. Here, rooster calls don't just measure distance, they mark the opening hours. You crest a low ridge, and there it is, a sprawl of tents, barrels, and bright cloth flapping in the wind, all arranged in semicircles like petals around a dry fountain. But there's no shouting, no transactions, just quiet bustle, because the market doesn't start until the rooster says so. A local rule, strictly observed, the first crow of the day opens the market. Not a moment before. And not just any rooster, the rooster. Sunrise himself. He belongs to the matron of the trade post, an elderly woman with eyes like obsidian and the posture of someone who's never once doubted she's in charge. You've met her before. She called Chuka too pretty for actual work and handed you a ceramic cup of mint tea without breaking eye contact. Her name is Betty. No one dares ask what the initial stands for. She spots you now and raises an eyebrow as you approach. Still dragging that opera bird through the sand? You bow slightly. He insists. She waves you toward the shaded waiting area, where other caravans are parked and resting. Everyone's watching the central perch, a tall wooden post painted in swirling blue ochre, where Sunrise the rooster sits, fluffing his feathers. He has one job, open the market with a single, ceremonial crow. And he's taking his sweet time. You lean over to Molly. How long's he been up there? Since before dawn, he whispers. Refused to crow. Demanded dried figs first. You glance at Chuku. He puffs his chest like he's ready to show this local bird how it's done. You hold him back. Not our territory. It's hard to describe the reverence in the air. Grown men are tiptoeing around crates of spices. Traders are whispering their haggling practice rounds. One woman's gently humming to her bird to keep it quiet. And then, finally, Sunrise stands tall. His neck stretches. His chest rises. His beak opens. Crow! It's a good one. Long clean. No tremble. The echo bounces twice off the surrounding rocks. The market erupts. Voices rise, fabrics unfurl, metal sings against metal. It's like the moment a storm breaks, except instead of thunder, it's onions, silver, and jokes about who's charging too much for dried apricots. You and your caravan step forward. The rule's clear: if you arrive before the crow, you rest. After, you trade. It's a genius system, really. It levels the field, prevents dawn scrambles and underhanded night deals. The rooster sets the clock, and everyone plays by it. Historians still argue whether this practice originated here or was borrowed from an older Nubian tradition, where temples used bird calls to schedule priestly tasks. Others believe it evolved organically. One rooster's early crow got everyone up, and someone just went with it. Either way, it stuck. And now, people travel 2 crow lengths out of their way just to experience it. You set up your stall quickly: cured meats, salt bundles, cloth dyed in indigo and dried in rolled cones. Chuka watches from his crate, judging prices with his usual blank-faced dignity. It's not long before you're deep in barter with a woman from the south. She wants 2 sacks of salt for a carved ivory hairpin. You say 3. She counters with 2 and a prayer. Chuka crows. She flinches. Did your bird just interrupt me? You shrug. He has strong opinions about ivory. Eventually, you settle on 2 sacks and a string of amber beads. Everyone leaves happy. Around the market, you hear other roosters chiming in now. It's unofficial, but accepted. Once Sunrise has given the first call, other birds are allowed to crow freely. It becomes part of the market's atmosphere: clucks, crows, laughter, the occasional goat bleat of protest when stepped on. But there's still structure. At midday, a second crow from Sunrise announces the start of high trades: precious stones, metals, long-haul goods. And at dusk, a final, tired crow ends it all. Silence falls. Deals close. People settle in for the night. You sit beneath a faded canopy, chewing on roasted lentils and sipping tea. A boy runs past with a carved wooden rooster, mimicking crows as he goes. His mother calls after him, laughing. He wants to be a rooster when he grows up. Tell him to aim higher, someone replies. Be the one the roosters listen to. You chuckle. But there's truth in it. For all their theatrics, the birds have structure. They bring order. Out here, in a world where hours aren't tracked by clocks but by shadows and sound, a rooster is a symbol of consistency. You watch Chuka sleeping beside your pack, feathers rising and falling. He's not Sunrise, but he's earned his own legend, his own set of echoes stretching back across dunes and distance. Before you turn in, you rattle the gourd. He lifts his head, crows. Just once. Just for fun. And somewhere, far off beyond the market walls, you hear another rooster answer. The desert wind blows strange today, rustling the canvas of the market tents like some ancient drumbeat no one remembers the lyrics to. You're packing up your goods, tying them down tight for the next leg of the journey, when you hear it, the unmistakable sound of a rooster crowing on command. Not a pre-dawn screech. Not a mid-journey echo check. No. This is precise. Timed. You pause, slowly turn, and see her. She's perched on a low stool beneath a faded parasol, cradling a rooster the size of a small pillow and whispering into its ear like she's telling it bedtime secrets. Her robe is deep indigo, the kind that leaves a chalky stain on your fingers if you touch it. She wears 1 earring and no shoes, and her left eyebrow is raised so high it's probably seen things your right one hasn't. This is Isa to the Whisperer, a merchantess known along the coastlines and dunes not just for her impeccable dried fig inventory, but for one very specific reputation. She speaks fluent rooster. Well, that's the rumor. You wander closer, feigning interest in a pile of sun-bleached almonds. She glances up but says nothing. Then, without a signal, without a gourd rattle or a grain bribe, her rooster crows again, low and soft, like it's singing just for her. You blink. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't coincidence. She sees the question in your face. Timing, she says, tapping her temple. Not training. They don't obey. They respond. You raise an eyebrow. To what? She shrugs. Tone. Posture. Maybe mood. You exchange a long look, one that says I both believe you and think you might be messing with me. Then Shuka crows from your side, sharper than usual. Isata's bird turns and crows back, equally sharp. A duel? A compliment? A sarcastic retort? Hard to say. But what happens next is even stranger. Isata holds up one finger. Her rooster quiets. She shifts her weight, hums softly, 3 notes, low, then high. Then the rooster crows again. Perfectly timed. Echo smooth. You open your mouth, but no words come out. You glance at Chuku, who looks positively offended. Isata chuckles. Don't worry. Yours is strong. Mine is theatrical. You sit beside her on the warm rock, curiosity outweighing pride. How did you learn? She takes a breath, gazing across the sand. I was alone for 3 weeks. My group left me behind by accident. 1 water gourd. 1 pack of dried bread. 1 rooster. You blink. They forgot you? She nods. Long story. Anyway, I figured if I was going to survive, I had to make the bird earn its feed. I started watching him. Talking. Mimicking his sounds. He started crowing only when I did something specific, tilting my head, shifting my voice. We found a rhythm. She pauses, smiling. Roosters aren't stupid. They just know they don't owe us anything. But they do like routine. If you match their rhythm, they'll follow your lead. Historians still argue whether any real merchant ever trained roosters to crow on cue. Most say the stories are exaggerated, parlor tricks from roadside performers. But people who've met Isata tend to leave convinced. Or at least willing to wonder. You stay beside her a while longer, watching her work. She uses sound and motion the way others use maps. A subtle wrist flick, a hum, and her bird answers. Not every time. But enough. Chuka doesn't join in. He's too proud. Or too suspicious. Or both. But later that day, when you're alone again on the trail and you hum a tune under your breath, he tilts his head and lets out a short, almost lazy crow. Coincidence? Maybe. But for the next several days, you experiment. You try different tones, rhythms, walking speeds. And every once in a while, Chuka syncs up. A crow right as you change pace. Another when you hum a specific melody. Is it training? No. Not really. But it's communication. Of a sort. One particularly still morning, you try a soft whistle, 2 tones, slow, then sharp. Chuka turns. Crows. You stop walking. He doesn't. He crows again. The others in the caravan are starting to notice. Molly says you've gone full bird-brained. Another trader offers to buy Chuku for 5 jars of honey and a camel with deep emotional maturity. You decline. Later that evening, under a sky smeared in orange and blue, you think about what Isata said. They respond. Maybe roosters were never just instruments. Maybe they've always been companions. You listen. They echo. You lead. They follow, sometimes. It's not about domination. It's about rhythm. And the better you listen, the clearer the crow becomes. You've left the sunrise market and its whispering merchants behind. The sand feels different now, heavier somehow, as if it's been collecting secrets for centuries and is tired of keeping them. Your caravan moves quieter today, less chatter, more inward focus. The route ahead is old. Older than most travelers remember. And that's because today, you're meeting the chicken cartographers of the Sahel. Yes, that's what they call themselves. And yes, they're real. You first heard of them through campfire gossip. 2 twins, Ali and Amina, born on the same morning, in the same dust storm, to a trader who insisted the gods had accidentally repeated themselves. They travel light, trade little, and carry roosters with names like compass, grid, and latitude. They don't trade goods. They trade maps, but not the kind you roll up and pin to tent walls. Their maps are living, breathing, crowing. Built not on parchment, but memory and sound. You know you're close when you spot the markers, 3 feathers tied to an acacia twig stuck in the sand. No words. No signs. Just feather logic. Molly leans over your shoulder. Ready to meet the weirdos? You smile. You're the one who brought salted melon to barter. He holds it up proudly. Nobody maps for free. The chicken cartographers appear just after midday, stepping from behind a dune like mirages made of leather and sunburn. Their robes are mismatched, their skin dark and cracked from wind, their eyes far too sharp for comfort. Each holds a crate. Each crate contains one rooster. Amina speaks first. You brought your own? You nod, gesturing to Chuku. Ollie raises an eyebrow. He looks theatrical. He's earned it. They nod, satisfied. Apparently, there's no greater insult than calling a rooster untested. And just like that, you're invited to walk with them. Not beside them, behind. They measure your steps. Your crow intervals. Your adjustments when the echo falls short or bounces oddly. Every reaction you make becomes a new line on a map they're building in their heads. You feel slightly judged. Chuka seems fine with it. The twins don't talk much. When they do, it's in short bursts. 3 echo delay. Wind shifted. Echo doubled, ridge curve ahead. Your rooster leans left when unsure. That last one feels personal. They lead you to an old resting site, one not marked on any route log you own. But they know it. They call it Crowstep Hollow. It's not a name you've ever heard, but as soon as you arrive, it feels right. The terrain dips gently, the wind moves in slow spirals, and when Amina's rooster crows, the sound doesn't echo, it circles. Ollie steps back and waves you forward. Crow here, he says. Let's see your path. You rattle the gourd. Chuku crows. The sound doesn't bounce, it raps. Loops lingers. Amina nods. Yes, he has the right throat for it. You frown. What does that even mean? She shrugs. Some birds project forward. Others ripple. Yours ripples. You don't know whether to be proud or insulted. But Chuka fluffs his feathers and pecks the ground like he's claiming it. Later, the twins show you their map. Not a scroll. Not a drawing. It's a series of pebbles laid in curves and rows. Each stone represents a crow. Each cluster, a change in echo quality. It's not labeled, but it tells a story. A real one. You see? Amina says. This is your route. Your sound print. Molly squints at the pebbles. Looks like a snake fell asleep. Ollie chuckles. Maybe it did. But if you follow these same sounds, you'll get back here without a single star. This is their philosophy, that every rooster leaves an imprint not just on the ears, but on the land. That routes can be rebuilt from crow patterns. That maps are heard, not read. Historians still argue whether the twins are geniuses or eccentrics. Some say their methods predate the kingdoms, passed down from desert shamans who followed bird calls like scripture. Others claim they're just bored traders who got really into rocks. But here's what matters, their routes work. Their map of the Sahel spans 3 empires and 6 dialect zones. They've never lost a caravan, never repeated a route. And when someone disappears in the desert, the twins can often find them by walking the land and listening for familiar crow intervals. Before you leave, Amina hands you a small cloth bundle. Inside? 3 pebbles, arranged in a triangle. A marker. A reminder. If you ever get lost, she says, crow twice, then wait. Place the stones like this, and listen. If the echo matches what you remember, you're close. If it doesn't, turn around. You thank them. Chuku crows once, unprompted, like he's closing the meeting. Ollie bows. Your bird is dramatic, but functional. You smile. So am I. As you walk away, you glance back just once. The twins are already gone, vanished behind the dunes, sound print trailing behind them like dust. The road ahead is drier now, bone dry, even. The kind of dryness that peels at your lips and makes you question how many more times you can chew the same date before it becomes sawdust. But you're not thinking about that right now. You're thinking about how weird it feels to walk without a rooster's voice echoing ahead of you. Because here, the crows have stopped. Not Chuku's, of course. He's still ready to announce his presence to every beetle in a 10-meter radius. But here, on the stretch leading toward the coast, feathers have given way to flags. You pause at the edge of a windswept bluff and gaze down into the valley below, a gleaming string of cloth markers, reds, yellows, deep indigos, staked into the ground like a row of cautious greetings. Each one flaps lazily in the breeze, catching the sun and casting ripples of color across the pale sand. This is the beginning of Port Sign Path, one of the first regions to abandon rooster-based measurement in favor of visual signals. Why? A few reasons. The coast is windier, louder, and traders found that crow-based travel didn't work so well when gulls screamed constantly and storms cut off sound like a rude tavern keeper. You step forward, Chuka quiet in his crate. Even he seems contemplative. Maybe it's the sea air. Each flag here marks distance the way crows once did. 1 flag, you walk. 2 flags, rest. 3? There's a water cache. But it's not just the number, it's the spacing. The flutter delay. Experienced eyes can read the rhythm the way others read echoes. Molly catches up with you, squinting at the cloth ahead. I hear they call it the flap system. You nod. Yeah. They say flags don't squawk at you if you step on their shade. Chuka sneezes, which you interpret as rude. The truth is, the transition from roosters to flags wasn't smooth. There was resistance, particularly among inland caravans who didn't trust anything they couldn't hear. One record from a Southern Guild meeting famously reads, "You cannot eat a flag. You cannot barter with a gus." A fair point. Historians still argue whether flags truly replaced roosters or just supplemented them in certain regions. Some think the change was political. Emerging port cities wanted to distinguish themselves from desert traders, flaunting visual order over audible chaos. Others say it was just about wind. One quirky bit of trivia? The first coastal flag warden, the person responsible for maintaining the flutter spacing of signals, was reportedly a retired camel driver who missed the desert but couldn't hear well anymore. He'd walk the route every week, adjusting flag tension and replanting any that got tangled. His name was Yarrow, and he insisted that flags talked if you listen with your eyes. You test the theory. As you walk, you watch the cloth. One ripples fast and sharply, that means it's catching side wind from a gap. The next is limp. No wind. You'll need to adjust your pace to avoid sand drift behind it. The flags are, in a way, a kind of silent crow. Each one still measures. Still speaks. Just without feathers or attitude. Chuka watches them too, neck craned. Jealous, you ask. He does not respond. But the side eye is strong. You stop at a flag cluster, 3 poles tied with black thread. That's a known marker, high trade zone ahead. Sure enough, you soon hear the clink of metal, the hum of distant conversation. Not a city. Not yet. But close. It's a trade ring, small, temporary. Built around the idea of visual order. The market's organized by cloth color. Red for perishables. Yellow for spice. Blue for textiles. No roosters crowing, no squabbles over echo range. Just flags. And footpaths. And whispers of sea breeze. You settle in, trade a bit, stretch your legs. You ask around, does anyone here still travel by crow? An old woman chuckles. I did once. Long ago. My bird was named Pepper. He crowed with a hiccup. Gus lost twice, but he never missed a dune when it mattered. Why'd you switch? You ask. She shrugs. Eyes last longer than ears. You think about that. And yet, there's something missing in the silence between flaps. The rhythm's different. Less alive. Later, as the sun dips, you watch Chuka crow toward the coast. The sound doesn't bounce. It just disappears into the salt-scented air, swallowed by the distant rumble of waves and gulls and wind. He crows again. The flags ignore him. You kneel beside him. They're not ungrateful, you say. Just deaf. He ruffles his feathers. Accepts a fig slice. Dignity intact. As night settles, you camp just outside the ring, where the flags start to fade and desert rules still apply. One trader nearby strings both a flag and a rooster perched to his wagon. A bit of both, he says. Old ways for old routes. New signs for the sea. That feels right. You sleep under a tent patched with both cloth and feathers, rocked gently by a world not quite past the crow, but no longer entirely ruled by it either. You wake to the smell of fried millet cakes and something else, a little sharper, a little sneakier. The kind of smell that makes you check your satchel twice and hold your water gourd a little closer. This is the edge of the coastal convergence zone, where desert caravans and sea traders meet, where currency shifts from cowrie shells to copper rings depending on the tent flap you walk into, and, more importantly, where you're about to stumble into one of the more uncomfortable chapters in feathered trade history, rooster fraud and foul play. It starts innocently enough. A caravan from the south arrives with a flourish. Painted wagons, banners stitched with red spirals, and at least 6 roosters perched along the lead cart like an avian welcoming committee. That's your first red flag. 6 roosters? For a single route? Overkill. You exchange greetings, and the lead merchant, a man who calls himself Nallo the Navigator, boasts of completing the entire 9-crow stretch in just 7 crows. You raise an eyebrow. Even with sand winds? Especially with sand winds, he says, grinning. Our roosters are enhanced. He doesn't elaborate. Just whistles. One of the birds lets out a perfectly timed crow, short, sharp, confident. The echo returns exactly 1.7 seconds later. Everyone nearby nods in appreciation. But something doesn't sit right. You pull Molly aside. Did that echo feel off to you? He frowns. It felt planted. That's not paranoia. That's experience. You've been on enough routes to know what a genuine echo sounds like, and this one was too clean, too controlled. You follow your instincts and spend the next few hours casually observing Nala's camp. You count rooster crows. You time echoes. And you notice a few disturbing patterns. First, the roosters only crow when cued with a very specific whistle, one too consistent to be coincidence. Second, the echoes always come back exactly the same length, no matter the terrain. That's statistically impossible. The desert doesn't behave like that. Sand shifts. Wind bends. No two echoes are ever the same. Unless, they're not echoes at all. You confront Nalo gently, asking how he manages such reliable crowing. He smiles, leans in, and says, "Good training." Then he winks. That's when you notice the small clay dishes hidden along the perimeter of his camp. They're filled with a strange black powder and shards of obsidian. You recognize it, echo reflectors. Old tech. Outlawed in some parts. These bowls can bounce sound back in perfect mimicry if placed at the right angle. He's faking the echoes. You're witnessing a classic case of crow manipulation, a scheme where dishonest traders amplify or falsify crow echoes to make distances seem shorter. It's a scam that can cost real money. If someone thinks they've traveled 9 crow lengths in 7, they'll overestimate their speed, their water supply, even their trade value. Back in the markets of Jin, there was a case where 3 merchants nearly came to blows because their crows disagreed by a full 2 markers. Turns out, one had tampered with his bird's feed, feeding it crushed pepper seeds to stimulate crowing at exact intervals. Historians still argue whether such tactics were rare exceptions or widespread enough to warrant the rise of neutral crow judges. Yes, that was a thing. Independent crowmen and crowwomen would be hired to ride along and verify the authenticity of each interval. Their birds were known as clean crows, and their silence spoke volumes. You decide to take action the old-fashioned way, call a crow off. You signal the gathered merchants and propose a public trial. Each caravan sends their best bird to crow from a marked point, and your team will measure the echo without revealing the terrain map. Nalo grins. He thinks he's got this in the bag. He sends his flashiest bird, black and gold feathers, proud stance, a neck ruff that screams overcompensating. The bird crows. Perfect pitch. But the echo comes back, too fast. You nod slowly, say nothing. Then it's Chuku's turn. You don't cue him. You just rattle. He crows, loud, natural, slightly raspy. You listen. 1001, 1002, 1003, bounce. Accurate. Honest. No reflectors. Just desert and air. The crowd murmurs. People start comparing notes. Then someone, an old woman with rings on every finger, points to one of Nala's reflectors and says, "That's a shell bowl." Sound tricks. My uncle used those to scare goats into corrals. The accusation spreads fast. Within minutes, Nala's camp is being inspected. The bowls are found. His reputation? Feathered and fried. To his credit, Nalo doesn't run. He laughs, throws up his hands, and says, "Well, it worked for a while." You nod. Until someone actually listened. As punishment, he's asked to leave behind 2 of his roosters, for use in local work caravans. Birds get fed. Echo fraud ends. Justice, as always, is a little dusty but fair. Later that night, Chuku eats 3 extra kernels of millet. You consider it a reward. He deserves it. Rooster fraud isn't common, but it's real. And like any system built on trust, it's vulnerable to those who think feathers are just a costume, not a language. But you know better. You've heard real echoes. You've followed sound across hundreds of kilometers. You've seen what happens when people fake it. And more importantly, you've seen what happens when they don't. You've barely shaken the dust of Nala's scam from your sandals when the next debate begins, not among merchants or caravanners this time, but among scholars. It starts at a crossroads village where a half-finished mud library leans at a nervous angle and a group of itinerant scribes are arguing loudly over a pot of spicy lentils. You sit nearby, sipping tea and pretending not to eavesdrop. Chuku rests beside your leg, ignoring the drama with veteran disinterest. The argument? A classic. Old as salt. Were roosters truly used for measurement, or was it all ritual? One scholar, tall and skeletal with smudged ink under every fingernail, insists the rooster was a symbol. A stand-in for time. Not a tool. The woman across from him, draped in blue and red robes that might once have been a banner, counters, and yet they mapped kingdoms by crow distance. Doesn't that suggest practical use? Another chimes in, you can't trust oral history. It mutates. Maybe the rooster was just an alarm, and someone turned that into a legend. You smile into your cup, because you've lived what they only argue about. Still, their points raise valid questions. Was the rooster ever meant to be a ruler's GPS, or did it simply become one because no one else thought to listen? Historians still argue over the earliest uses. Some say the practice began during the Sonic rise, when the Wagadu Empire stretched its reach and needed simple, repeatable units of measurement across trade routes. The rooster, already part of daily life, was co-opted. Others believe the roots go deeper, linked to pre-Islamic rituals, where birds were seen as messengers between worlds. The crow wasn't just distance, it was a blessing. A permission. A way to appease the spirits of the road. One fringe scholar, with no less than 4 scarves and a bowl of chickpeas no one dares touch, insists that rooster-crow intervals were never about measurement at all, but about invoking memory. He claims each crow served as a sonic landmark, anchoring you emotionally to a place you might never return to. You consider this. Could be true. After all, how many times have you heard chook a crow and thought, ah yes, this is where we found that cracked oasis, or this is where Molly tripped over that invisible rock and blamed ancestral sabotage. There's a strange power in sound. It doesn't just travel, it stays inside you. One of the scholars finally notices you. Traitor, she calls. You use a rooster, don't you? You glance at Chuku, who gives a very deliberate peck at a pebble. I do. Do you measure by echo? Yes. Would you call it accurate? You shrug. More accurate than Ibrahim's hand-drawn map of the Eastern Trails. That one had a whale on it. We're in the desert. Laughter ripples through the group. But, you add, he's also unpredictable. He's not a tool. He's a presence. That seems to hit home. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. No one can quite agree what roosters were to the ancients. Every culture used them differently. In some regions, they were couriers of the gods. In others, living clocks. In rare cases, even currency. One record from the lower Niger Valley mentions a tax being paid entirely in feathered collars, likely trade cocks. You recount a story you once heard from a Songhai merchant. A village lost its only rooster during a storm. The elders refused to travel until a new one was spoken to by the sand, which apparently meant sitting the bird on a hill and waiting for it to crow after sunset. If it did, it was deemed worthy. Superstition? Ritual? Or maybe a kind of calibration? A test? The scholars seem torn. They scribble notes furiously, one of them asking, did your rooster ever crow wrong? You think. There was the time in the Whisper Hills, where Chuka's crow bounced off a rock in such a strange way you nearly led the caravan in a circle. Or that evening in the dry flats, where his voice was muffled by a sandstorm's approach, just enough of a warning to change your path. Was that failure? Or was that intuition? A quiet voice joins the discussion. The librarian, a boy no older than 12, sits cross-legged near the scroll piles. He speaks softly, almost as if not to scare the dust. My grandmother said roosters are the only ones brave enough to argue with dawn. Everyone goes quiet. You smile. That's the best definition you've heard yet. You thank the scholars, refill your canteen, and move on. But their debate lingers in your mind. It follows you across the next crow length, nestling into your thoughts like sand into sandals. What were the roosters, really? Maps? Rituals? Alarm clocks? Maybe all three. Maybe none. But one thing is certain, they measured something. Whether it was space, time, memory, or rhythm, they left their echoes behind. And you? You'll keep listening. Just in case they say something new. The road turns quiet again, stretching long and thin beneath a slate-gray sky. The wind is softened into a hush, like the desert itself is holding its breath. You're walking without the usual chatter, no marketplace jokes, no songs hummed between rest stops. Just footsteps and the occasional crunch of dry brush underfoot. You've reached the last rooster road. That's what the elders call this stretch. The final thread of Chromap travel still known, still whispered about in aging circles. It's not marked on any official route logs anymore. The new generations prefer flag markers, camel foot pacing, even imported compasses. But here, the crow is still king. The land itself seems to honor the tradition. Gentle ridges rise at regular intervals. Stones line the path in weathered curves. You recognize it from stories, the 5 Crow Trail, named for its evenly spaced echo points. Walk this path, crow at the start, and the sound should return to you 5 times before fading completely. It's part legend, part audio geometry. You glance at Chuku, perched alertly in his traveling crate. His feathers have dulled with dust, but his eyes are sharp as ever. He knows this is a special place. The kind of route that tests not just memory, but loyalty. The first echo point comes quickly. You rattle. Chuku crows. The sound bounces once, neatly, crisply. You smile. That's one. The second? Softer. A bend in the land curves the sound like a bowed string. Still audible. 2. You fall into rhythm. The walk becomes ceremonial, almost sacred. You count steps. You measure air. Every crow marks your passage not just through space, but through time. It feels like you're walking through the ghost of a system, something once vibrant and lived in, now preserved in echo and sand. Somewhere around the third point, you spot them. 3 elders seated beside a stone outcrop, wrapped in robes of faded ochre and green. They sit in a triangle, unmoving. Not guarding. Just being. You approach slowly, respectfully. One of them speaks without turning. You're walking the crow trail. You nod. Trying to, at least. He hums. Most forget it's here. The woman beside him adds, even more forget how to listen. You crouch beside them, offer a pouch of salted nuts, which they accept without ceremony. Then she does something unexpected, pulls a cloth scroll from her robe and lays it flat. It's a map. Not of terrain, but of sound. Circular patterns radiate from marked points. Tiny symbols represent echo strength, wind direction, even known distortions. It's not a map you follow, it's one you feel. This was made by our grandmother's grandmother, she says. She walked the crow trail with 3 birds. 1 for distance, 1 for warning, 1 for farewells. You look at Chuku. I think mine's all 3. They smile. Not mockingly. Warmly. As if they've heard that before. You ask why they remain out here, away from cities and new tools. The eldest shrugs. Because echoes fade too fast when no one listens to them. You sit in silence with them for a while, listening. Not just to roosters or wind, but to the space between. The pulse of a rhythm that once guided gold, salt, stories, lies. One elder finally nods toward the horizon. Finish the 5. Let your bird echo. We'll mark the passage. You rise, humbled. Crow 4 comes at a ridge split, where the trail dips just enough to swallow sound if the angle is wrong. You hesitate, then rattle. Chuku crows. Silence. Then, faint, delayed, bounce. 4. You exhale. And walk. The 5th and final echo point is nothing special to the eye. A flat patch. Scattered stones. No landmarks. But when Chuku crows here, the sound soars. It rides the wind like a feathered promise and returns not just once, but twice, once forward, once behind. A perfect loop. You stand there a long time, letting it wash over you. The elders catch up, walking slowly, staffs digging into the sand. You finished it, one says. And then he kneels and plants a fresh marker, a carved stone with a single feather pressed into the top. Another crow walked, he murmurs. You help them plant it deep. You ask how many still walk this road. The woman smiles. Fewer than before. But more than you'd think. And that's the truth, isn't it? Even in a world that's moved on, filled with printed maps, satellite pings, and soundless paths, there are still those who remember. Who count crows not because they must, but because they choose to. As you camp that night beside the 5th echo stone, Chuka sits silently at your side. He doesn't crow. He doesn't need to. He's said enough for today. You break camp at first light, the 5th echo stone still casting its long shadow across the sand. There's a reverence in the air, like you've walked through a forgotten hymn and only just realized you knew the melody all along. Chuka's quiet, watching the horizon like he's waiting for something, or maybe remembering something. Today, you follow a trail that barely exists anymore. This path isn't marked on maps. It doesn't show up in route chants or merchant memorization games. It's passed on by whisper, one traveler to another, at night, around embers and millet cakes. They call it the Echo Line. You heard about it from an old caravan master years ago. He spoke of a desert outpost, mostly crumbled now, where the roosters still crow for no reason. Where even the wind seems to carry a memory. A place where the last living sounds of the old system still float, waiting to be heard. It's not far. 3 crow lengths, maybe 4, if the wind behaves. As you walk, you notice the silence. No traders. No flags. No markers. Even the dunes seem subdued, like they're listening too. And then, you hear it. A crow. Not Chuku. Not yours. But one, far off. Measured. Steady. You freeze. Count. 1001, 1002. Echo. Chuka perks up. He hears it too. Not the sound itself, but the memory in it. You push forward, heart thudding, not in fear, but in recognition. At the top of the next rise, you see it. The outpost. Or what's left of it. A few low walls, sun-bleached clay, a broken tower leaning at a lazy angle. There's no one here. No tents. No smoke. No camels tethered in the shade. But the sound? Still there. You walk slowly into the hollow and find the source. A perch. Just a single wooden rod lashed between two crumbling stone stubs. No bird on it now. But the crowing you heard? It came from nearby. Probably a wild bird. Or a descendant of one left behind. Chuku crows. Loud, clear. The echo returns instantly. It bounces, not from a rock or a ridge, but from the walls themselves. The entire outpost is shaped like a chamber, a natural amplifier. This was designed, or discovered, long ago by someone who understood sound in ways we barely grasp now. You walk the perimeter, testing it. Rattle. Crow. Bounce. You change angles. Crow. Bounce. Slide. One spot near the tower even sends the echo into a spiral. You swear the sound wraps behind you before fading. This place isn't just an outpost. It's an instrument. The last sound post. You find carvings along one wall, lines etched in a circular pattern, possibly denoting crow intervals, wind readings, even travel times. It's not a script you recognize, but the structure is clear. This was a system. Someone took the time to turn Rooster calls into a full-blown language of distance. Male wanders up beside you, awe softening his usually dry voice. They say this place was where the feather system began. Or maybe ended. You nod. Or both. He crouches beside a worn bowl carved into the floor. Inside? A single feather. Preserved. Probably not ancient, probably not magical. But still, it feels right. You sit beside it and let Chuka perch freely. He paces. Then, of his own will, he crows. Not for signal. Not for show. Just because he's meant to. And that's when you realize, this entire place remembers. Every stone, every grain of sand, every echo off every wall. It's like walking through the memory of a conversation long past. You hear another crow, distant, different. Another traveler? A wild bird? You'll never know. But it fits. This was the Feather Archive. The Rooster's final whisper. A place where sound still measures, even if no one's measuring anymore. You stay longer than planned. Mark a few spots on your scroll. Not for others. For yourself. Just so you don't forget how it felt to hear a bird's voice speak to the land and the land answer back. As you leave, you don't speak. You just rattle. Chuku crows. And the echo, soft and sure, follows you home. Night falls gently on the camp, a velvet curtain pulled tight over the dunes, soft and endless. You sit beside the dying fire, the last embers glowing like tiny stars fallen to earth. Chuku settles near your feet, feathers softly rising and falling with each breath. The desert is quiet now, save for the occasional whisper of wind and the distant cry of a jackal, nature's nocturnal messenger. You look back on the journey, on the path carved not just through sand and stone but through sound and memory. How many times has Chuka's crow marked a step forward, a warning, a celebration? How many echoes have returned with stories folded inside them, carrying the weight of empires, traders, kings, and wanderers? The feathered system you've followed is more than a method. It's a song, sometimes clear, sometimes warped, but always alive. From the ancient routes of Timbuktu to the coastal flags fluttering by the sea, from secret echoes in forgotten outposts to the modern market's first crow, it threads through time, binding past and present with invisible lines of sound. You remember the debates, the myths, the odd traditions, the scams, and the moments of pure magic. The woman who spoke to her roosters, the twins mapping with pebbles, the cockfight that settled a border, the scholars who still can't decide whether it was ritual or science. All of it, echoing together in a chorus you now understand a little better. Your journey ends here, but the road goes on, for roosters, for traders, for the desert itself. Somewhere beyond the next dune, a new crow will rise, marking another step, another story. You lean back, eyes heavy but heart full. The night wraps around you like a feathered cloak, soft and warm. Chuku crows once more, a gentle, steady call that fades slowly into the dark. And as the echoes settle into silence, you close your eyes and drift, carried away on the wings of a bird's timeless song. The fire's glow dims, the sand cools beneath your skin, and the vast silence embraces you like a familiar lullaby. The desert night stretches endlessly, soft and serene, inviting you to release the weight of the day and float quietly into dreams. Here, in this moment, the world slows. The feathered calls become whispers fading into distance, the rhythm of travel turning gentle and slow. Breathe in the cool air, feel the steady pulse of ancient stories flowing beneath the stars. You are part of this lineage now, a traveler who has walked alongside sound itself, feathers and echoes marking the path home. Let the memory of those crows settle softly inside you, a delicate thread weaving through your rest. Sleep well. Tomorrow, the journey continues, but for now, let the quiet hum of the desert night carry you deeper into peace. Good night. Sweet dreams.